The joke hit the table before Ethan Miller even sat down. So, Ryan said with a grin that felt sharper than friendly. Did traffic delay you, or was it another one of those flexible work hours? Laughter followed soft, polite, controlled. The kind that pretended not to hurt. Ethan paused behind his chair, took a slow breath, and then sat anyway. He had learned long ago that reacting only fed moments like this. Tonight wasn't about winning. It was about surviving. The dining room looked like it belonged in a magazine. Long oak table, white plates, real candles. Everything expensive without trying too hard. It was the same room where Ethan had done homework as a kid, where his parents once celebrated promotions and bonuses. Back then, he fit. Tonight, he felt like a guest who had missed an important invitation. Across the table, his father, Richard Miller, sat straight-backed and quiet, the way he always did when observing more than speaking. Years in finance had trained him to read rooms without moving a muscle. To Richard, silence was a tool. To Ethan, it felt like pressure. Ethan glanced to his left and froze for half a second. Lena Harper was there. She wasn't supposed to be. Her hair was pulled back simply. Her dress calm and modest, nothing loud. She looked older than the girl Ethan once knew, but in a way that felt steady, not distant. When their eyes met, surprise passed between them, followed by something warmer recognition mixed with unfinished history. "Hi, Ethan," she said, soft but clear. "Hey, Lena," he replied. That one exchange unsettled him more than Ryan's joke ever could. Dinner began quickly, as if no one wanted space for awkwardness to breathe. Megan scrolled through her phone. Claire talked about a charity event. Ryan dominated the conversation the way he always did, listing numbers, deals, and plans that sounded impressive even if no one fully understood them. And next quarter should be even stronger. Ryan said confidently, "If the market stays friendly." Ethan nodded politely, cutting his food. He listened more than he spoke. He always had. He learned early that in his family, silence was mistaken for weakness. "So, Ethan," Claire said, tilting her head, "are you still working for yourself?" "Yes," he answered. "I consult for startups." She asked. "For small businesses," Ethan said. "Mostly family-owned. Some are struggling." Ryan laughed again. "That explains it." "Explains what?" Ethan asked calmly. Ryan shrugged. "The jacket." "No offense." Claire smiled thinly. Megan didn't look up. Lena's fork paused. She looked at Ryan, then back at Ethan. Her expression changed, not pity, not judgment, but something closer to concern. Richard finally spoke. "And how is that work treating you financially?" The question was simple. The tone was not. Ethan felt every eye turned toward him. This was the moment they waited for at the part of the evening where comparisons became conclusions. "I'm comfortable," Ethan said. "I live within my means." Ryan leaned back. Comfortable isn't the same as successful. Ethan met his brother's eyes. "Depends on how you measure it." A brief silence followed. Not uncomfortable. Just tense. Lena shifted slightly in her seat. "Some people measure success differently," she said gently. Ryan smirked. "Sure, but numbers don't lie." Ethan didn't respond. He reached for his water instead, the conversation already moving past him. As he lifted the glass, his sleeve slid back without him noticing. The watch caught the light. It wasn't flashy. No diamonds. No oversized face. Just clean lines, worn leather, and a quiet presence. Ethan had worn it for years, not as a statement, but as a reminder. Across the table, Richard stopped chewing. His eyes narrowed not in criticism, but recognition. He leaned forward slightly. "Ethan," he said slowly, "where did you get that watch?" The question sliced through the room. Ryan blinked. Megan finally looked up. Claire frowned, confused. Lena's gaze dropped to Ethan's wrist, curiosity blooming into surprise. Ethan lowered his glass. It was a gift. A gift from whom? Richard asked. Ethan hesitated. "From Mr. Caldwell." Ryan laughed. "You mean the old real estate guy?" The one who used to donate half the city. Richard didn't smile. When did he give it to you? Richard asked. About 6 years ago, Ethan said. Before he got sick. The room felt smaller. That watch, Richard said carefully, wasn't available to the public. Ethan frowned. I didn't know that. Richard's eyes stayed locked on the watch. Caldwell only gave those to people he trusted deeply. Lena's posture stiffened. She looked at Ethan again, really looked this time, as if something invisible was becoming clear. Ryan scoffed. Dad, it's just a watch. Richard didn't look at him. It's not. Ethan felt his chest tighten. He had never thought much about it. To him, the watch was a symbol of gratitude, not value. He had helped an older man rebuild a failing nonprofit. He had stayed late. He had listened. He had never asked for anything. Caldwell had given him the watch on his last good day. I want to talk to you later, Richard said quietly. Ethan nodded, unsure what else to do. Dinner continued, but the tone had shifted. Ryan spoke less. Megan watched more. Claire seemed distracted. Lena was quiet, her thoughts clearly elsewhere. When dessert was served, Lena finally spoke again. Ethan, I didn't know you still wore it. He looked at her. You remember? She smiled faintly. You told me once it reminded you to stay honest. He nodded. It still does. Something unspoken passed between them, regret, admiration, maybe both. As the plates were cleared, Ethan realized something had changed. Not because he defended himself, not because he explained anything, but because something small had revealed. Something large. The watch had spoken when he didn't, and for the first time that night, no one at the table was laughing. The room had emptied, but the weight of the evening still lingered. Ethan stayed near the window, hands in his pockets, staring at the city lights blinking like distant stars. He had always loved this view, but tonight it felt different, charged with something quiet, something unspoken. The laughter and chatter had faded, leaving only the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional car passing outside. And then, behind him, a voice cut through the silence. Ethan. He turned slowly. His father stood there, tall, composed. The same man who had spent decades judging numbers, markets, and people with unflinching precision. Now his eyes were focused entirely on Ethan. There was no mockery, no expectation, just interest. That alone made Ethan's chest tighten. You never ask for credit, Richard said. That's always been your flaw. Ethan's brow furrowed slightly. I don't need credit, he replied. Richard shook his head, slow and deliberate. You underestimate what you've done. People like you, quiet, steady, honest, they get overlooked. Ethan didn't respond immediately. He had spent years being the quiet one in this family, the one who didn't flash wealth, didn't boast of success, didn't fight for attention. And yet, here it was, a recognition that felt foreign, almost uncomfortable. Richard's gaze drifted to the watch. That watch, he said slowly, almost reverently, was not just a gift. It was a signal. Caldwell gave it to people he believed in. Not because of money, but because of integrity, judgment, and trust. Ethan's hand instinctively touched the leather strap. He remembered the day he received it, the smile on Caldwell's face, the subtle weight of responsibility it carried. He hadn't thought much about it since. To him, it was a token of gratitude, a personal reminder to stay steady when the world tried to push you into showy success. I didn't realize its significance, Ethan admitted. Richard smiled faintly. Most people don't. Most people see a simple watch and call it nothing. They don't see the choices behind it. The hours you've spent helping people quietly, without fanfare. The patience. The discipline. Ethan felt a lump in his throat. Recognition was rare from Richard, but it was even rarer when paired with understanding. I just did what I thought was right, he said softly. Richard nodded. That's enough for the right people. And enough for me to want to introduce you to some opportunities. People who notice substance, not just flash. Ethan blinked. Opportunities. Richard's expression was serious but encouraging. Yes, People who matter in business, who matter in giving back. I think it's time you met them. Before Ethan could ask more, the soft sound of a door opening caught his attention. Lena stepped into the room, quiet, cautious, and still radiating that calm presence that had always drawn him in. "I should go," she said, her voice low, carrying a hint of hesitation. "But I'm glad you came tonight." Ethan's heart skipped. "I'm glad I did too," he said, almost instinctively. Lena took a step closer. "I used to think success was loud, that it needed recognition and applause. But tonight I saw something different." Ethan tilted his head slightly. "What do you mean?" She smiled faintly, a smile that was warm but thoughtful. "I saw integrity, quiet strength, someone who doesn't need to prove anything because they know their own value." Ethan felt a warmth spread across his chest. It was strange how simple words could carry such weight. For years he had been judged by shallow measures, jokes about earnings, casual comments on lifestyle, the constant comparison with his brother Ryan. And now Lena was looking at him differently. "Really looking you. See me differently," he said softly. "I see who you've always been," she replied, "and I see who you're becoming." Her words lingered in the air, delicate yet powerful. Ethan wanted to ask so many things at once. How long had she been thinking this? Why did it take a simple watch for someone to notice? But he didn't. Sometimes silence spoke louder than questions. Richard cleared his throat behind them, drawing Ethan's attention back. "Next week, come by the office. I want you to meet a few people. They'll appreciate what you've done, and maybe they can help you take the next step." Ethan nodded, feeling a mixture of anticipation and humility. This wasn't about proving Ryan wrong or showing off to Claire. It was about acknowledgement, real acknowledgement from someone he respected deeply. As Lena walked toward the door, she paused. "Dinner next week?" she asked, a hint of hope threading her tone. "I'd like that," Ethan said without hesitation. And just like that, she was gone, leaving behind a lingering sense of possibility. The room felt empty again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was full of quiet expectation. The evening had started with judgment, laughter at his expense, and subtle doubts cast by his family. Now it ended with recognition, opportunity, and the spark of connection that had never truly faded between him and Lena. Ethan stood by the window again, watching the lights below. The city didn't change, but he felt different. Not because he had proved anyone wrong, not because he had a powerful mentor or an exclusive watch, but because for the first time in years, people had seen him, not the surface. Not the jokes or comparisons, but the real substance beneath. He thought of Lena and the way she had looked at him. That gentle admiration, that recognition of effort and patience reminded him why he had stayed quiet all these years. Success wasn't in loud proclamations or flashy statements. It was in the small, steady acts that no one often noticed. The watch had caught his father's eye. Yes, but it had also reminded him of the life he had built, carefully, quietly, and honestly. Ryan's laughter and the casual jabs seemed distant now, irrelevant. They were noise, part of a world that measured value in the wrong ways. Ethan understood it differently. He had learned that the moments of patience, the choices made without applause, and the courage to stay authentic mattered more than anything else. Richard's hand on his shoulder was firm and affirming, a subtle gesture that carried approval without fanfare. For Ethan, it felt monumental. Years of proving himself silently, of choosing the harder path of integrity, of staying patient in a world obsessed with instant success. It all mattered now, even if no one else had noticed. Lena's words echoed in his mind as he leaned against the window. "I see who you've always been and who you're becoming." There was warmth in them, hope, and something almost romantic in its gentle honesty. Ethan smiled softly, realizing that sometimes recognition came quietly. But it was enough to shift the entire trajectory of your life. He thought about the opportunities his father mentioned, the people he would meet, the doors that might open. But more than that, he thought about himself, about the years of effort, patience, and quiet determination that had led him here. The evening had started with judgment and ended with acknowledgement. Not just from his father, but from someone who had always mattered to him. And as he watched the lights below, Ethan realized that the real value wasn't in proving anyone wrong. It was in staying true to himself, in letting his integrity speak louder than words, in letting the quiet moments reveal the strength he had carried all along. The watch had been the symbol, but the story behind it, the effort, the patience, the honesty, was what truly mattered. That night, Ethan didn't feel defeated, embarrassed, or overshadowed. He felt seen. For the first time in a long time, he felt recognized not for what he earned, but for who he was. And in that recognition, he found a quiet triumph. A soft but undeniable victory that no sarcasm, comparison, or judgment could ever take away. He thought about Lena one last time before heading upstairs to his room. She had always been more than a friend, more than a memory. Tonight had reminded him of the connection that had never fully faded, the respect that had always lingered beneath the surface. It was a reminder that the quietest hearts often carry the deepest strength. And that recognition, real recognition, often comes in moments no one else sees. Ethan finally sat, letting the night settle around him. The city lights continued to blink, indifferent but steady, and he smiled, knowing that tonight wasn't just a dinner. It was a turning point, a soft but lasting reminder that patience, integrity, and quiet strength are always noticed. Eventually. And when they are, the reward is more powerful than any applause, any joke, or any comparison could ever be. This was his moment, not of loud triumph, but of quiet recognition. And for Ethan Miller, it was everything.